Hi, good morning, and welcome to the 53rd installment of the Seattle Metro Chamber's Executive Speaker Series and our very first via webinar, which is exciting. My name is Lee Jacobson. I'm an Events and Programs Manager here at the Chamber, and I'm excited to have you all join us today. So the purpose of the Executive Speaker Series is to highlight all of the different industries that are vital to our region. So as we're now progressing through the phases of reopening, we're going to look specifically at industries through the lens of economic recovery after the pandemic. So today, our panel will discuss how the construction industry has managed working safely during lockdown. Many of their projects were considered essential and didn't stop. What opportunities for growth they see as we start to come out of this, how technology is helping, and we'll talk about promoting equity in their industry. So before we get going, I do have a couple of logistical pieces for everyone. If you need technical help during the webinar, please use the chat box that you'll see down at the bottom of your screen and just send a message to the panelists and I will be able to help you. If you have a question for our speakers though, please use the Q&A box. So you'll see that little icon down at the bottom with Q&A, and that just helps us keep the questions better organized so that we can get to as many as possible. And just a note that today's webinar will be recorded and I will post the link on the event page later today, and it will be in my post-event email. So with that, we'll get started by thanking our sponsors. So we wouldn't be able to host the series without the support of our presenting sponsors, Advanced Professionals Insurance and Benefit Solutions and the Business Health Trust. So I would like to welcome Shannon Spencer, who is here on behalf of Advanced Professionals and BHT, to share a few words with us.
Thanks, Lee. Like she said, my name is Shannon Spencer, and I'm the Training and Events Manager for Advanced Professionals Insurance and Benefit Solutions, which is the wholesale benefits division of ABD and their insurance and financial services. So we help trade groups and other associations such as the Seattle Chamber provide health insurance and other employee benefits to small to mid-sized companies throughout the state. And as a sponsor, I'm here today representing the Seattle Chamber's program through the Business Health Trust, which offers medical, dental, vision, life insurance, et cetera, to chamber members. And because we negotiate these benefits at a wholesale level, so you can kind of think like a Costco model, we're able to offer businesses between 2 to 199 employees with the kinds of prices that insurance plans they're more comparable to those of larger companies that have access to those. So this gives our region smaller companies additional negotiating power when they're trying to hire in our competitive job market. And my role here is just to connect you with our services and make sure that you're aware of the employee benefits available to you through the trust and your membership. And again, my name is Shannon Spencer, and I'm the Training and Events Manager for Advanced Professionals, and I'm here representing the Business Health Trust, which offers you employee benefits and to small and mid-sized companies that are members of the Seattle Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon, and thank you to those sponsors. So let us get going. So I will introduce our moderator, who will then run the show after this. So Sonia Forster is the Seattle District Manager for the AGC of Washington. In addition to providing member services in King County and local government affairs for the region, including the Port of Seattle and Sound Transit and federal facilities, Sonia is a founding team member for Culture of Care, AGC of Washington's Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, which was recently adopted nationwide through AGC of America. Sonia is also appointee to the Priority Hire Advisory Committees of King County and the City of Seattle, represents the Bellevue Chamber as an appointee to the East King Chamber Coalition, and serves as a trustee on the AGC Health Benefit Trust for Alaska and Washington chapters. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Sonia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, I'm excited to join you today. Thank you, Lee. Before we get to the panel discussion, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Dave DeHunt, Executive Vice President of AGC. AGC is committed to representing our members' interests and building a better climate for construction. It was with these goals that David joined the Governor Inslee's Construction Roundtable to develop guidelines for reopening the industry in the wake of COVID-19. David, please join with us and share what that experience was like.
Well, thank you, Sonia. And by the way, AGC is awful lucky to have Sonia Forster as our Seattle District Manager, doing a wonderful job. Let's start a little bit before the roundtable, what was going on. At that point in time, here in the state of Washington, we were all, as a construction industry, trying to figure out what other states were doing, how they were responding to this COVID crisis. And a lot of states, frankly, just stayed open. So as you can imagine, we spent a lot of time in Olympia advocating for construction and that we're working outdoors, we're working at distances, and that we should stay open. It got very intense just before the governor closed everything down. And what I mean by that is we were down there advocating. There were large projects whose owners were advocating to stay open. Certainly one of the big surprises in all this was WSDOT, the Washington State Department of Transportation. They were advocating to stay open with the governor's office. And the Monday, the governor shut everything down on a Tuesday. The Monday before, we had been working with our members for a week to come up with COVID safety plans that were submitted to WSDOT in order for members to continue working. So Monday afternoon late, we have a discussion with WSDOT. Everything looks great. The contractors did what they were supposed to do. And we're gonna keep working as a public agency. Flash forward to the next day, Tuesday, I get a call about 7 o'clock at night, and WSDOT wants to talk. And they explained that the governor was shutting everything down, including WSDOT. So we spent many hours that evening on the phone talking to the governor's office. However, it was apparent that at that moment in time, they were done talking. And so we all understood that that's what to shut everything down was what the governor intended, except for essential projects in construction. So we got together as AGC and strategized and talked about what we should be doing. And so the following Monday, we let things cool off down there at the governor's office. We let things cool off. And then we sent an email to the governor's office, and the email said simply that the purpose of the communication was not to demand that construction be opened, but rather that AGC would like to be helpful and engage in a discussion with the governor's office about how construction could be opened safely at an appropriate time. And from that moment forward, the whole discussion started to open up. It was more of a helping situation as compared to, like I mentioned, demanding situation. So the governor's office actually responded back a couple of days later and said, this is a good idea. We should get together and talk. And so they came up with the idea of forming a roundtable. The roundtable consisted of 6 members, 3 from labor, 3 from management. So we had Dave DeHunt representing AGC. We had Greg Lane, the executive for BIAW, representing the home builders. We had Mike Ennis from AWB, representing the greater business community in the state of Washington. And as an aside, I just wanted to mention that AGC of Washington, we have over 600 members. And our contractor members are about 50-50 split between open shop and labor. And that's an important piece to these discussions because we need labor and open shop represented in the talks. So on the labor side, we had Mark Riker, who is the executive for the Washington State Building and Construction Trades. We had Josh Swanson, who represents the operators union number 302. And we had Matt Swanson, from the carpenters. And the reason the carpenters are included in this is because they're not a member of the Washington State Building and Construction Trades Council. So it was, important to include them because they have a big share of work here in the state of Washington. So we got a note from the governor's office and inviting us all to join this roundtable for construction, they call it. And the reason they stated was that we formed the roundtable was for clarity on safety and health expectations for essential projects, as well as prepare an appropriate strategy for the return to work for the rest of construction. So as we are going through the process, keeping that in mind was very, very important for us. That we had existing projects that we needed to keep people safe and healthy at, and then we needed to as well worry about the rest of construction. So we had our first meeting, kind of laid down the ground rules. We agreed that we would meet twice a week, and the idea was that the 6 of us would meet in between to try and come to an agreement on the proposal to be sent directly to the governor's office. So I think that first week we had 16 meetings. We worked late at night, we worked over the weekend, got something out to the governor, and lo and behold, he put it in earlier than anticipated. So we came up with a strategy of doing it phased in and phasing it in by risk. So the first phase just was the lowest risk group of folks. And so that just meant that people could go to work that could work 6 feet apart all the time. And again, we're working on the improvements for safety plans for essential projects. So once we got that done, that opened up home building, and it took care of everything except for more complicated projects, as well as new projects. So we worked through that process again and did phase 2 and opened up phase 2 about 3 weeks later. It took more time, and because we had so many workers back at work, didn't seem like there was the intensity. So getting all the construction open again was our goal, and we got together as a group and we decided that we wouldn't disband, that we would stay together. And so we still are advocating for other parts of construction. Some of the things we're working on right now are the quarantine for workers that come from out of state, not contiguous for 14 days. We're working on some relief for masks under heat strain rules as we get into the summertime, and any other discussions that come up. So with that, I know I'm only supposed to take 5 minutes, and I'll quit there. And thank you for the opportunity, and just wish you all well in this prolonged period of adaptation.
Okay. Thanks so much, David. I see I see myself, and I also see myself muted and no video. So I'm just going to assume that I'm on. Is that right, everybody? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, here I just got a little bit off. Okay, thanks so much, David. Now I'm excited to introduce to you our fantastic panelists. I welcome our panel to turn on their videos as I introduce you. First, we have Sai Katera of Headlight. As co-founder and president of Headlight, Sai's focus is the growth of Headlight's business across all markets, segments, and critical geographies. Under his leadership, the company has quadrupled its market share over the last 3 years for its photo-based inspection technology that has been used on over $20 billion worth of infrastructure construction projects nationwide. Welcome, Sai.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Appreciate it. Good morning. Sonia mentioned president, co-founder of Headlight. Our former alias was Pavia Systems. If anybody has heard of our former name, we were actually our claim to fame. We were the first company ever to be spun out of University of Washington civil engineering back in 2005. I can't believe it's been 15 years, which explains the gray hairs that are coming in over the time frame. As Sonia mentioned, our main focus has always been to strengthen our nation's infrastructure through the lens of technology. So our current flagship product provides photo-based inspection technology, primarily serving infrastructure construction, main customers being owners. So for example, Washington State DOT, Sound Transit, Seattle DOT, engineering firms who represent those owners. So for example, Petit, Jacobs, and WSP locally in the Washington markets and nationwide. And we also work with contractors as well. So locally, Graham and Lakeside are two customers on the docket as well. But really appreciate the opportunity to join the panel and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Next, we have Ryan Piper from Hensel Phelps Construction Company. Ryan is operations manager for Hensel Phelps, a general contractor with significant commercial projects for the Port of Seattle, Sound Transit, local school districts, and various healthcare providers across Western Washington. He is the executive for all Hensel Phelps Sound Transit projects, as well as their critical healthcare portfolio. Over the past 4 months, he's been actively involved in keeping essential projects going during the COVID-19 pandemic. And Ryan?
Well, thank you, Sonia, for that introduction. And good morning to everybody. I'm happy to be here and share a little bit about what we do. As Sonia mentioned, we are a nationwide general contractor. We provide development, construction, and facility management services. We are working up and down the Sound, mostly on public works projects for the Port of Seattle and Sound Transit in Bellevue, Redmond, and in Puyallup, and then at a host of critical healthcare facilities up and down Western Washington. Like you said, Sonia, I've definitely been involved in the COVID situation since we started the pandemic, and just really keeping a focus on how we can do things safely and keep the economy and the construction industry moving, especially for our essential projects. So thank you for having me, and I also look forward to the conversation today.
Thanks, Ryan. Next, we have John Salinas Construction Company. Salinas Construction is third generation heavy highway and airfield concrete construction contractor, working in both private and public sector. John, who's been president of the company since 2011, worked his way up through the company doing general labor and project management, and then advising the president. He's also board member at the Association of General Contractors and the American Concrete Paving Association. He is also a member of the American Concrete Paving Association National Airfield Specification Task Force and the city's Priority Hire Advisory Committee. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, just a real quick background. I'm the owner and president of Salinas Construction, Inc. We're a concrete paving and flat work contractor based out of Mukilteo. We mainly perform work as a subcontractor or a specialty contractor, serving mainly public works contracts. About 95% of our revenue comes from public works, regarding, DOD, FAA, state DOTs, counties, mass transit, municipalities, and ports. We service areas along the Pacific Rim, mainly in Washington, but also Alaska, Hawaii, and some various outer islands. And I too look forward to the panel conversation, and thank you for having me.
Thanks. Lastly, we have Kat Sims from the Master Builders Association. Kat is the executive director of Master Builders Association of King and Snohomish Counties, the largest and oldest local home building association in the nation. Kat has dedicated her career to addressing issues at the intersection of real estate, land use, sustainability, and environment. Her ability to find common ground and drive bold initiatives helps advance her career as Senior Director of Sustainability and then Vice President of Government Relations for Plum Creek Timber Company, and later served as Vice President of Environmental Affairs, Sustainability, and Corporate Responsibility at Weyerhaeuser. Welcome, Kat.
Hi, thanks for having me, Sonia. A few words about the Master Builders Association. It's actually the Master Builders Association of King and Snohomish Counties, and that's just such a mouthful. We call it either the MBA or MBACs for short. So the MBA is a 501c6 trade association. representing primarily, but not exclusively, for-profit residential builders, remodelers, and land developers, as well as a myriad of tradespeople, suppliers, and other folks to support the residential construction industry. We have approximately 2,700 member companies. The majority of those are small businesses. And we create value for our members several different ways. We have an advocacy staff of 8 full-time local lobbyists. Those folks work with dozens of local cities, counties, municipalities related to land use and real estate regulations. We offer a variety of classes related to the construction trades. So those scan the spectrum from CPR in Spanish and English to how to comply with the new state construction codes. We run a Built Green certification program and help builders learn how to build more sustainable, energy efficient buildings. In 2018, 70% of residential homes and townhomes in the city of Seattle were certified to the Built Green standard, and that program is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. One other quick word about the MBA is that most people sometimes think about MBA as representing only high value custom builders, and that's not true. Our members build all kinds of housing along the spectrum, including our member Palette, who builds emergency shelters. And over time, like the MBA, many of our members have shifted focus to a more urban product with a smaller footprint. So the MBA's vision is to ensure that everyone in our 2-county area has a healthy and productive place to call home. Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you very much, Kat. So we'll get right into our questions, really focusing on how things have been going through this pandemic. What's interesting about our industry is that construction really never stopped. We had certain sectors that were shut down, certain types of activities that were shut down, but we have been going and constructing in an ever-changing environment this whole time. And so the question is, how are we keeping up with health and safety as this time goes on? And especially as we're heading into the summer months, I know David brought that up as something that is an ongoing discussion with the governor. How are we helping our workers stay safe and keep going during what continues to be a changing and difficult time? And Kat, I would like to start with you in the home building arena and what you're seeing from your members.
Thanks, Sonia. So most local home builders were sidelined or partially sidelined for about 72 days of the pandemic. That's a long time. That definitely does have impacts to the industry. That said, we absolutely did support the governor's desire to protect worker and community health and safety, and support the recommendations of the governor that Dave and Greg Lane and others from the industry launched. The direct economic impacts of the shutdown are really pretty easy to quantify. We know that between March 23rd and April 24th, just 1 month of being sidelined, resulted in $1.2 billion in lost wages for home builders, subs, and related businesses statewide. So a huge economic impact from home builders being sidelined just for that 1 month. And as you know, uncertainty is really bad for the business environment. And so that's having continued impacts on the ability to get financing. We'll say that the Master Builders Association worked to put together a very robust toolkit for both phase 1 and phase 2 for not just our members, but for the general public to use. You can find that toolkit at MBAKS, that's MBAKS, covid19.org. And that toolkit has pretty much everything a construction worker, a general contractor, or a sub would need to get back to work safely, including examples of job hazard analysis, cleaning schedules, plans that need to be posted on site, signage in multiple languages, English, Spanish, Korean, Vietnamese, all that safety signage in various languages is really necessary because the workforce, at least in the home building industry, I can't speak for the commercial industry, is really incredibly diverse. So again, that toolkit is available for free. We're finding that people can comply with it. I will say that if you're framing a house or roofing a house in July or August, it's uncomfortable to wear a face mask. I mean, let's just be honest. If any of us have worn a face mask and you've worn one to go out for a run, you know it's hard to wear a face mask through significant physical labor, but people are complying and finding ways to comply, and folks are really happy to be restarted.
Thanks so much, Kat. I mean, it has been such a, you know, there are bright spots in this, and one of them has been for our associations respectively to be able to help you, the home builders, and us, the commercial and heavy civil contractors, get back to work with all those resources. And it's been just great. I want to turn to Ryan and John and talk about what that has been like for your companies, one as a general contractor and one as a subcontractor, working through this really ever-changing health and safety environment. And then this is a two-part question, and I'll remind you what the second part is, so don't worry. But the second part is, how do we go forward? What kinds of challenges are we seeing as we're bidding the next project now, as we continue to operate in a crisis that has not completed itself? So maybe Ryan, let's start with you as a general contractor. How are you managing your projects through this changing environment, and what do you see going forward as you start building your portfolio into the future?
Thanks, Sonia. I think the biggest thing that we've experienced over the past few months, being that most of our projects were deemed essential from the beginning, is that in an industry where safety is always at the forefront, it needed to be at the forefront in a different way, and it happened almost overnight. And so I would say from people in my position and at all levels of the company, management levels, what do we need to do to continue? Because the owners and the industry expect us to find a way to continue, but we need to navigate how do we do it safely. And so I'd say that was really the first shift that happened almost overnight with some of the governor's orders was, what are these precautions? What is required to go do certain tasks safely? I think we quickly deemed that many things that we do on a daily basis can be performed with social distancing, but there's very critical tasks, especially in a commercial building, that you cannot do with safe social distancing. So some of the things we started immediately were to really flag and identify how could we improve the working conditions on the site to provide the opportunity to social distance. Some of the things that we started right away were to stagger work shifts, to reduce interaction points. You know, in home building, the crews are a little bit smaller. On projects like ours, one of our major projects is a rail project. We found it quite easy to get some of the rail contractors and people out on site to distance. But when you move into more traditional spaces like electrical rooms, interior build outs, you start to get into congested areas where you need to do something different. And also, you just have a lot of individuals interacting within one workplace, which is common in any workplace. You have break areas, parking lots, things of those nature. So one thing was just to try to break up the interaction of the personnel on site. We started multiple shifts as well to try to reduce the density of people on site at any given work shift. You know, we found, where do people find confidence or comfort in the industry? You know, if you've been on a construction site, wash stations are like you would see at a public event. You know, they're porta potties and plastic facilities. One thing was to bring on something that has warm water with soap and paper towels. So we brought on some different facilities that we normally don't have. but they make a difference. If anything, they make a difference in the perception of the work site to really show that the general contractor or the owner is providing the people that are coming to work with the confidence that it's a safe place to do work. Other things Kat mentioned is, what are the cleaning cycles you need to use? Immediately, without having much definition, we needed to do more. And so we added daily cleaning to our facilities, the facilities of our clients, of our subcontractors, at least to buy us some time that we knew we were providing a very sanitary environment and trying to limit the germs and the transmission of the disease, as well as providing heavy frequency of cleaning out on site, the high traffic areas, the high touch zones. And then from a staffing perspective, once you get beyond the individuals that actually perform the labor to do these high volume projects, is our management staff. Traditionally, that's something we always struggle with, is to convince people that you don't have to be on site. I would say up until this pandemic, it's been hard to prove that that's a possibility, but we were forced to do so. And so we staggered some of our office team shifts and really came up with some ways to really spread people out in the workplace on our projects to make sure that even our individuals in the project sites, on the trailers and our offices, have the distance to maintain safe working environments, both on site and in our offices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I want to turn to John, because John's work and his in his company is more highly specialized. And John, why don't you speak for a minute about how it's specialized and how it's what particular challenges that you've had working in this health and safety environment with your crews?
So, as explained earlier, Salinas Construction mainly does concrete, paving, and flat work. And our work ranges from a crew of roughly, say, 14, 15 on the high end to smaller crews such as 3. And throughout all this, I think the toughest part of going through this initially was, like Ryan said, some of our projects were deemed essential. Some of our projects were deemed essential, then suspended. Some of our projects were not deemed essential. And so initially trying to even figure out what is going on in the world. What are the rules? How do we continue onward? What does a plan look like? What PPE do we need that's not normal to what we would do was just chaos. Very difficult to manage in the first 72 hours, even just trying to get your head wrapped around it. In terms of the stuff that we've had to deal with. So our craftspersons do not traditionally wear a face mask. They will if they're drilling, they will if they are sanding, anything like that. But those are people that are respirator fit and trained and have gone to the doctor and stuff like that. A lot of our work, you're on your hands and knees near other people. So trying to devise a game plan to spread people out, work with the general contractors to figure out, okay, we're obviously not going to be able to produce the same amount of things that we do in a normal day. So what does that look like? Can we bring in additional equipment? Can we bring in pumps to minimize the number of people that are interacting with each other? It was very difficult. And then logistically trying to relay our message to every person that was an employee of Salinas, was tough, because it's like, which jobs are going to be going onward right now? Which jobs are stopped? Who do we need to bring in? How do we move our management staff away if they're not essentially needed on a project? How do we communicate with the general contractors to continue schedule going? It was chaos. And for us, construction's been moving towards a more carbon neutral approach to things. And so I'll just give this real quick example. So over the last 4 years, because of the various crew sizes we have, I've moved to purchasing, say, 4-door vehicles to move a full crew of, say, 4 to 5 people together to a project site, given that a lot of the work we do is in the Seattle Bellevue area where traffic's horrible and parking is even worse. And so to minimize our impact to a tight project urban site, we could consolidate what we had into one vehicle as opposed to a gang of vehicles that would be out there taking up space. With that being said, that was kind of blow that up. That idea throughout all this was not good because effectively I had consolidated my fleet for a variety of reasons. And now it's just kind of like, nope, now we got to space everybody out. Does that mean one person per vehicle? Does that mean requesting, rather than having centralized dispatch, people drive their personal vehicles to project sites? Is there enough parking? It's been chaotic. It's calmed down maybe over the last few weeks, but that initial month and a half was pretty rough. And as a smaller contractor, you really rely on agencies and associations to kind of help guide you, because a lot of this is foreign to us. We don't have a full staff of safety professionals that are running a 500-person job site. We're kind of a smaller group of people that are trying to manage our 4 to 5 man crews. And so it was very chaotic.
Yeah. Feeling all that, John. We are, CAT and AGC, and, I know it's been all hands on deck, and it's been a hugely challenging time for all of us to get through, especially you all with boots on the ground. So going to change a little bit and see if we can glean any positives out of this time here.
One thing, Sonia, if you don't mind, if I could add a little bit to what John and Ryan had said, it's really interesting too. So John, you sort of mentioned the spectrum of reactions where certain projects were deemed essential, certain projects were stopped. Adding also a bit of a national perspective too, we've seen two mindsets nationwide. One mindset, absolute paralysis. The other mindset, clearly opportunistic. And so states like Pennsylvania and New York completely shut down 100% of their construction programs. North Carolina, they stopped not because of COVID safety, but because of financial requirements. They didn't have the funding to actually keep projects moving. So they had to midstream stop, which in the long term will be significantly more expensive. The context is, number one, of course, the first priority. We have to keep workers safe, and also the impacts of the community for COVID. But we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. And the second piece is keeping construction moving because of the economic impact. And so the flip side, some states were very opportunistic, because what happened over April and May, we saw traffic levels at historical lows. For example, if you're talking about transportation construction, down as much as 80%. And so some of the forward-thinking owners, which helped drive some of the industry-related components together, if we can do it safely, they were able to significantly accelerate the schedules for construction programs. So, we heard one story in California about a project that had a 6-month schedule to get to a certain milestone, that they were able to complete it in 6 weeks. And so if we're able to safely do the things that Ryan and John had said, which is, number one, make sure the new safety procedures on the job site are there. But number two, there's other opportunities where COVID-19 provides a risk. Exchanging of, for example, physical paper documentation. That's one key risk. Office constrained workspaces, that's another one. And so there's places where other tools like innovation can step in and help fill that gap to allow us to do both things at once, which is keep workers safe, first priority, and number two, super important, keeping the economy moving with the projects and making sure that they move forward.
Yeah, that's a great transition. That was the next line of questioning. And Sai, let's just keep you on deck to talk about new uses in technology during this time. I know that, and we can ping Kat for any ideas of innovations in permitting and inspecting and the contractors and what they're seeing. But Sai, what are you seeing from your vantage point as far as how the industry is adapting to this new environment and hopefully becoming more nimble as we move forward?
Yeah, it's been interesting too, just the transitions that have occurred overnight and the mindset shift, right? So for better or worse, our industry has always been a late adopter of technology. But now, because of the necessity, we've got to find ways to innovate in order to work around some of these obstacles. And so it's finding innovation that can get us out of this either or mentality, where either we keep workers safe or we continue working, and we can do both. And part of the solution is those field practices are going to be different. So what's remarkable and interesting about construction is the work will always occur on the job site, right? So we build projects with our hands, but we make decisions with our heads. And providing tools to remotely stay connected with the field and creating a real-time connection to help with decision making has been an incredible benefit to a lot of the industries across the country that we've seen. So, quick story I'll share. One of our customers in Texas, he was a chief inspector. So he's got a team of about 4 people underneath him, but he is in an at-risk category from an age perspective of COVID. And so he had significant concern, plus his wife actually has some medical conditions. So those two things put together basically said to him, he went to his management and said, look, I can't perform my role and be on the job site like I used to be because I need to make sure that my family stays safe. But he still wanted to contribute. And it's a good thing too, because, his firm was leveraging a particular photo-based inspection technology for over a year prior to that. That allowed him to actually still perform 100% of his job duties, provide support to his team that's in the field, and stay virtually connected. So he was able to do 2 things at once. Number one, meet the obligations of his family, but number 2, meet the obligations of his team and provide, strategic application of technology to do that. And the big thing for him, he's got 30 years of experience. He's got some junior folks in the field that rely on him, but he was able to virtually be present with them every day on the job site, using innovation to try and still keep him and his family safe, but support his colleagues in the field. And so there's really key strategic applications of technology that can make a huge difference to contributing to moving things forward.
That's great. Thank you. I want to touch on one other topic before we talk about and end it with a conversation on diversity and inclusion. But Ryan, I want to ping you for a conversation, just a recap of what you're seeing about public funding and our transit agencies and transportation and what we might see for just illustrate for the audience what we're up against in this new environment with reduced revenues and still the need for public works.
Sure. We're definitely heading into a challenging time. I think right now we're in the process of assessment, of understanding how this is really going to play out over the coming months and potentially years. And that's going to take a little bit of time for the agencies to really determine what their next steps are going to be. I think, Sai, you made a great point, and it's what we're waiting to see. There is some opportunity here to be had, whether it be on our highways, whether it be in our airports. This could be the best time to go capitalize on some capital improvement projects because it is the least impactful and potentially the most cost-effective time to go do it. I'd also say that with some market sectors slowing down, we probably will see an influx of available resources, qualified firms to go do that work because some of their work has slowed down in some of the market sectors. So I think that's definitely where we are today. We're already seeing in this time of assessment that the large agencies are looking at their portfolio on the horizon and things are moving out in time, which is a challenging topic to talk about. Large businesses, small businesses alike, is because you can start to see that pushing out, which means we're going to really need to work hard in the immediate future to find some of that revenue to keep us busy.
Yeah.
A little too early to tell, but definitely some things sliding in time while all the agencies start to determine where they really sit and how this is going to impact not only today, but kind of for the coming months and for the longer term, and how they're set up financially to determine what they can proceed with.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a really lively conversation. I want to make sure that we leave some time for Q&A at the end, but I will, kind of wrap up with some conversation about equity in our industry and our respective diversity and inclusion initiatives at the association level, and then also at the employer level. It does, there was a line of questioning that we had that we didn't have time for that had to do with workforce needs through this, but I think that the equity and inclusion discussion really touches on that as well. So panelists, think about that as I call on you to talk about this this topic. This diversity and inclusion topic is very important to us with COVID-19 and the recent community discussions around race relations. As industry leaders and employers who are on the front lines of creating these inclusive cultures, this discussion is just very important for our industry and our future workforce as we see demographics changing. At AGC, our Culture of Care initiative started 3 years ago, and you heard a little bit about it in my intro. But this year, we're very proud that AGC of America has taken the initiative nationwide. We're going to be in a couple weeks celebrating Culture of Care Awareness Week, July 6th through 10th, and producing some new resources to help job sites talk about some of the issues that are at the forefront today and eliminating everyday racism and sexism on the job. So I just want to open up this discussion to the challenges and opportunities that both the crisis of COVID-19 and the heightened discussions around the Black Lives Matter movement have been having in the workplace. Kat, maybe I'll just turn to you first and talk about what Master Builders is doing in this arena on the home building side.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. So it's probably not a surprise to anybody who's on this call that through our systems, we exclude vast swaths of people from opportunity. We need to do a better job creating more housing at all price points so people can leverage the opportunities of our region, the plentiful higher wage jobs, great schools, great parks, trail amenities, the arts, shorter commutes, access to sophisticated healthcare, and more healthy and plentiful options for nutritious food at competitive prices. And when you think about, or at least when I think about equity and lack of equity in housing, I think about two different things. First of all, why do we live where we live? Maybe it's seen as a safe neighborhood with excellent schools, close to your job, you don't have very far to commute. Probably there are other good paying jobs near where you're living. So if you have a spouse or a partner, they can also find a good paying job. Maybe you need to access really excellent healthcare at the Fred Hutch or some other specialty care nearby. And some things you might not have given voice to, but I bet play a role, is that public health experts have long known that a person's zip code is a reliable factor for determining things like lifetime earnings, risk for disease transmission, access to healthcare, and shockingly, even life expectancy. So when we only allow one residence per lot in 75% of the area in the city of Seattle, we are making a very intentional decision to have exclusive neighborhoods where only wealthy people can live. And primarily, those wealthy people are white people, not people of color. The second thing that I'd encourage you to think about are our governmental systems. There is a very strong correlation between regulatory systems and how stringent regulations are and the most expensive housing markets. And zoning and land use regulations really perpetuate this. The Growth Management Act, passed in 1990, has said this is where building can go and it can't go anywhere outside of that. So we're not creating any more land for development. This is the bucket. If we can't move to have duplexes, triplexes, ADUs, DADUs in 75% of the land that is the city of Seattle, we are intentionally saying that we are excluding people of different economic means from living in the city. We are forcing them into much longer commutes. We are, forcing them to have a less of a quality of life than those of us who live in urban areas. And so we're really thinking about this. We know that redlining has a direct correlation to these government systems of where people live and who can live there and how many people can live there. And so those are the things that we're thinking about. They're core to our work, and they impact every business that's on this phone call today and your ability to recruit and retain talent.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think there was a lot of amazing fact-based information that just raises awareness. And I think that's the core about what's happening right now. It's raising awareness. And that's why the protests right now, I think, are so powerful. It showcases just absurd injustices and inequities in the systems nationally, in the country in 2020, and it shines a bright light on those inequities. And so I think that's part of why you're seeing the movement, because you see this and you realize that it's so important for us to stand up for each other in the face of it. And then the question becomes, all right, what do we focus our time and attention on? And there's sort of two sides to it, right? There's causes and there's symptoms, and there's value in both, but it really all starts with awareness, right? So one example, I learned recently that 97% of federal cases don't go to trial. 97%. So think about a scenario like this, where someone gets arrested for a crime they didn't commit, but the disparity between the punitive consequence of going to trial is so disproportionate that the choice is almost no choice at all, right? Low-income individuals, they don't have access to the resources to post bail. And there's statistically proven that people in jail are more likely to plead guilty because it's the fastest track to get themselves home. So what happens? You plead guilty, no day in court, no trial, no due process, but you get a brand new title of convicted felon. And guess what you lose when you're a convicted felon? Unless you're in Maine and Vermont, you lose your right to vote. So take that structure, that systemic structure, and imagine for a moment that was somehow applied inconsistently. Maybe, hypothetically, among racial lines, perhaps. Then you amplify that with a for-profit prison system, and then you trace it back to the amendment, right? 13th Amendment, where the law of the land bans slavery, except there is an escape clause in slavery. Embedded in our code, it says, except as punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. Yeah. Put that all together, right? And my head exploded. And that is what creates the awareness that needs ultimately to drive us to take action.
So thank you, Sai. I think you've illustrated very clearly that your personal feelings on this topic are what our whole workforce is grappling with. Everybody's got their experience, and everybody's got the reality of understanding how our friends and neighbors and family have experienced this topic, and we bring all that to work, and we really as an employer community need to be aware that the emotions are running high right now, and we need to take a little extra care with listening to one another. So I know we only have a couple minutes left. I want to thank you all very, very much for participating today. And if we do have any questions from the audience, we do have a few minutes left that we can take those. Let's see, Leah, I want to make sure that I see the questions. a question from Jody to all the panelists, a statistic to share with the team, and I'm not sure which statistic you were referring to, Jody. Maybe we can follow up with you after that. Maybe we'll just wrap it up on this topic and talk about what's happening on the job site with our folks. And I just want to turn quickly to Ryan and John and talk about how you are fostering an inclusive environment there at your work with your workers, and what you see going forward with your workforce development. John, let me start with, go ahead, Ryan. Yeah.
Well, I'll just be brief so John can have a few minutes. I think the biggest thing we're experiencing right now is a time of listening and perspective. I think, like Sai said, we don't have the answer, but we need to be willing to listen and put the effort forth to go try something different to create even more inclusive and diverse work sites, communities, all the way up. I think that's where the focus has really been, and where we need to look out. I think the other thing is to really have at the management level is kind of an ear to what's going on, and remind people to keep things at a productive level. I think right now there are people in our communities, our Black employees, that have a lot of emotions, and I think that it's fair that they need to express those. And I think there's some opposing sides, maybe not opposing, but just other perspectives that maybe it's not the right time for that right now. Mm-hmm. We need to be listening and thinking about what can we do differently to improve our societies, our projects, to make sure that they are inclusive for everybody, our Black employees, all of our diverse employees, because that's very important right now to make sure that we're looking for ways to do something different to improve.
Yeah, thank you. John, I want to give you the floor to finish us up here.
So I guess I come from a little bit different perspective, because I'm not going to answer it on my personal feelings on it. I'm just going to kind of talk about, what I'm seeing. And so I, like Sonia, serve on the Priority Hire Advisory Committee for the City of Seattle. And prior to the real active protests that are going on right now, and I personally live in Seattle, so it's everywhere. With that being said, I've always felt, I've grown up in construction. So my grandpa, my dad are the ones that started this firm, and eventually it came into my hands, right? And we've always been a Hispanic American company, and we've always had people of multiple ethnicities performing craft work. So I've always felt like construction's a very good place for diversity to actually take place. It's a craft-based, merit-based industry where it's about your skill set. It does not matter what your skin color is, what your sexual orientation is, none of that. And so with the priority hire, there's some programs that people need to know have existed in construction long before what we're seeing right now. And my work on the Priority Hire Advisory Committee, is trying to drive up. There's goals that are set in place for city-funded projects, and their goals, as of right now, have 40% of all worker hours on those projects greater than 5 million, funded solely by the City of Seattle, to be from what they're calling distressed zip codes. Distressed zip codes are made up of living under 200% of the poverty line, college education over the age of 25, and general unemployment within that particular zip code of the King County region. And so there's a lot of these plans that are in place trying to not only kind of talk about diversity or trying to increase that. These are mandated. These are real goals that are set in place that one needs to follow. And so I know as a minority-owned business, 62% of my staff are minorities. So I get to see a lot of diversity ranging from a lot of different ethnicities. And I've always believed that construction is a great place to learn how to fish. Mm-hmm. And it's a place where you can learn a skill set. And that skill set in this day and age, especially along the public sector lines, is a very good way to make a living. Wages are at all-time highs for specific crafts. And I can only speak, we're a union-based firm. I can only speak kind of from that public works perspective. I don't have a good grasp as to what's going on the private side of things, but I assume as public projects have raised their wages, that there's been an equal or somewhere near private side increase also. And it has been a great way for people to make a real career path in something that a lot of times maybe construction wasn't your first choice to get into. A lot of us, you know, maybe caused some trouble when we were younger, and you get into construction sometimes by hook or by crook, and you go out there, and right now with wages being where they're at, people can make a really good living. And there are cities and counties and school systems that are all mandating a certain percentages of people to increase inclusion across a bunch of different ethnicities and backgrounds. And I think it's great. I think it's having a direct effect. I mean, Sonia and I have to look at the statistics every month that we meet, and you can definitely see it. So I've always felt like construction's a very good place for inclusion, for diversity, and it's very merit-based. And so I think the toughest part about that is in construction, at least on my side, the thing that we don't have very well represented just from a community is women. And so not a lot of women are in the crafts. And so we're missing a very large chunk of our population participating in what that is. And, you know, that would greatly help if you want to, you know, increase, you know, diversity here. We need some women to participate in the crafts and join in and know that it's a very healthy place to make a real living.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you. And apologies to everybody, we went over a little bit, but I think a very important message there at the end. Diversity and inclusion, hugely important to the future of construction, and open invitation to come get trained in our industry and help us out. So thank you very much. We're just gonna go ahead and wrap up. Lee, is there anything I'm missing before we say goodbye?
No, I want to thank all of the panelists, and thank you, Sonia, for a great conversation. It was very interesting. We'll send the recording out after the event. And if you have any questions for the panelists that we didn't get to, if you want to send them to me, I can maybe send it around and try and get an answer for you. And then just calling out here on the screen a couple of upcoming events that we have in our We Got This Washington series, where you can learn a little bit more about the state and our region's response to coronavirus. So thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.